Hello, my Bill 1000 Nation. How is everyone doing today? We're back with another one. Oh, I'm excited. Alright, we're starting this one off with top 5 videos called 5 Disturbing Real Life Horror Stories That Will Give You Insomnia. That sucks. I have a hard enough time sleeping. Anyone else like that? You can be tired as all get out. Wash off the stink of the day. Put on your comfy clothes. Cuddle up in your bed. Now, I'm a big boy, so I got a fan that blows like right on my face because I like to be cold whenever I sleep, like I do. And then I cuddle up with the little, and I go, we're Starling behind me, and we're all just, and then all of a sudden you just wide awake. I hate it. I hate that. That's all right. Let's get it. Just do this. Yeah. Usually has some stuff at the beginning. All right, here we go.
Mummies of Guanajuato. Between 1826 to 1837, a devastating cholera pandemic swept through many parts of the world, causing more deaths more quickly than any other epidemic disease in the 19th century. By around 1833, the outbreak had reached Guanajuato in Mexico. As the bodies mounted up, they were quickly buried to try and control the spread of disease, and sadly in some cases, it's thought that some were buried before they'd actually died. Some years later, in around 1865.
Do you say it looked like some of them had been buried before they had actually died? As in they was buried alive? Oh, whoa. Whoa.
The local government introduced a burial tax that forced families of the dead to pay a sum of money to keep their bodies buried. If they couldn't afford it, the corpse would be dug up. Inevitably,
What? You mean to tell me that you just lost a loved one? You're burying them in the ground. Now you're going to have to pay a tax to keep them in that ground. What do you do with them if you can't afford the tax? Bring them back, throw them on the front porch? Little Bobby walk out the next day to get ready for school. What's wrong, little Bobby? Grandpappy Pap's on the porch. What?
some families were unable to afford the tax, meaning their deceased loved ones were unceremoniously removed from their graves and moved to a storage facility.
Oh, that's bad too, though. I mean, that's better than throwing them on your front porch, but where we going? Oh, we're going to go visit Grandpappy Pap at his grave. Oh, you passed the graveyard. No, he's in Warehouse 24 with a bunch of other people. Yeah. No.
However, as cemetery workers began digging up the corpses, they were shocked to see the extent to which they had naturally mummified, with some of their faces frozen in what looked like screams of terror. Word got out about the horrific sight of the mummies, and soon people began paying workers at the cemetery a few pesos to have a sneak peek at the contorted remains.
Now, they're. Oh my God, are you serious? Not only is digging up the people disrespectful enough, and then throwing their bodies in a warehouse, you're going to let people pay you to see them? Oh, someone getting haunted.
Eventually,
Someone getting haunted.
demand was so great that local authorities established a museum and started charging an admission to view the mummies and generate income for the town.
Did they just... Now the whole town's just getting in on it. I would be irate if someone dug up my family member and then just started letting people pay them to see them. That is beyond disrespectful. Bro. That's wrong. That's all kinds of wrong.
For many years, visitors could get up close and personal with the twisted mummies as they were just propped up against the walls, secured with ropes and wires. And because some visitors started taking bits of the remains for macabre souvenirs,
Alright. Who in the heck is gonna be like, hey, let's go see some dead people? Get there, it's like, I'm gonna take their little toe. Why? As a souvenir. There's something wrong with people, bro.
the local
No.
government was forced to display the mummies behind temperature-controlled glass. Today, the museum displayed 59 out of the 111 bodies that were removed from their graves. Amongst them is the oldest and first one to be dug up, Dr. Remigio Leroy, a French immigrant who had no family to pay the grave maintenance tax. His mummy is displayed still wearing the smart suit he was buried in. Also on display is what is claimed to be the smallest mummy in the world, a fetus taken from his mother who was pregnant when she died. But perhaps the most horrific exhibit is that of Ignacia Agula, a young girl who had a heart condition which
Did a fetus? Are you freaking kidding me? That's deranged, bro.
caused her heart to slow to the point she appeared to be dead, and during her battle with cholera, her family and the doctor believed she was dead, and hurriedly buried her.
I already know where this is going. He done said believed she had been dead, and they hurried and buried her. This poor lady probably wasn't even dead. Oh my god, they buried her alive. So not only does she have a heart condition that makes people think she's dead, she also had cholera, which could have very well killed her. And not only did she make it through both of those, but they buried her alive on top of all. That's... no.
However, when she was dug up a few years later, it was evident that she wasn't dead when she was buried, and she was found turned in her coffin and appeared to have tried to eat her arm, possibly in a desperate bid to stay alive. The museum really is the stuff
That's
of
too
nightmares.
much.
A lot of mummies are dressed in the clothes they were buried in, and some have photos of how they looked in life. But the overriding image is the contortion of fear on their faces, and the thought of what really goes on after we die and are buried in the ground. The museum has been the inspiration
It's not even them. More than likely, most of them was freaking alive. What kind of look would you have on your face, fall asleep, wake up, and be in a box, suffocating to death underground? You'd be like, ah! Dude.
for a couple of books and films. The most well-known is Ray Bradbury's short story, The Next in Line, a bone-chilling tale about malevolent supernatural forces that Bradbury wrote after he visited the museum in 1947. The The distorted mummies were also used in the eerie atmospheric opening sequence of the Nosferatu the Vampire by German director Werner Herzog. Hisashi Ouchi, the 18...
Before, gotta stop you right there. So, not only did they bury people way too fast, probably wasn't even dead when they buried them. Started charging a tax. You could not pay this tax. They dig up your family, throw them in a warehouse. Then not only that, it's like, oh, since you can't afford for them to stay in the ground, we're going to put them in this warehouse and, have people pay us to come in and stare at them. And then on top of that, oh, we're not putting in a souvenir shop, so they're just going to take whatever they want. And then I guarantee you some family member got mad because they went there to see old Grandpappy Pap and he was missing like 3 toes and a finger. And they're like, no. And then they put him behind glass and there's fetus. There's a fetus. Some never go there. I'm never going there. No, no, because whenever I die, I want to stay exactly where I was put. Unless, I become a zombie, and then I want to be buried on a hill, so, with a hang glider, that way, death from above type deal. But other than that's a bunch of bull.
3-day death. This next story is so horrific, it's...
Did this man just say 83-day death? This poor guy died for 83 days. That guy died for 83 days. That's horrible.
Hard to believe anyone could have allowed it to happen. The death of Hisashi Ouchi is considered to be one of the most horrendous in modern history, and his story exposes the lengths the Japanese medical experts were prepared to go in order to keep a man alive as some sort of inhumane experiment.
Oh.
On September...
I said, that's nice. At least you're trying to keep it but okay, inhumane, no. The niceness level went, no.
The 30th, 1999, Hisashi Ouchi went to work as normal at the Tokaimura nuclear plant in Japan. Hisashi worked as a technician in a uranium processing plant operated by JCO, a subsidiary of Sumitomo Metal Mining Company. Hisashi and his 2 colleagues were asked to prepare a small batch of reactor fuel. It wasn't a process they were familiar with, as it was the first time in 3 years that JCO had requested this, meaning no proper qualifications or training requirements were in place. Furthermore, the technicians were under pressure to complete the task to meet shipping requirements. As a result, a catastrophic error was made. To purify the reactor fuel, workers were supposed to use an automatic pump to mix up 2.4 kilograms of enriched uranium with nitric acid. Instead, they manually used a stainless steel bucket and mixed 16 kilograms of uranium by mistake. The incorrect measurement of high purity enriched uranium oxide.
That is like a mini bomb. Little bomba. Oh, radiation poisoning. Ugh. So, I guarantee you, when they mix this, they somehow started a nuclear... Oh, yeah. No.
Mixed with nitric acid. inadvertently triggered a self-sustaining nuclear fission chain reaction that released intense gamma and neutron radiation.
And it's not the same gamma that makes the Incredible Hulk. That'd be scary.
Technicians first realized something was wrong when they saw a blue flash that triggered the gamma radiation alarms. Ouchie was the nearest to the precipitation tank, while his colleague was standing on a nearby platform, and the other colleague was sitting at a desk 4 meters away. Almost immediately after the leak, Ouchie and his colleague experienced pain, nausea, and breathing difficulties, and Ouchie, who had received the most significant radiation exposure, had problems with mobility and coherence, and eventually lost consciousness. A worker in the next building realized the severity of the incident and called for emergency medical assistance, and all 3 men were taken to hospital. The plant was evacuated, and the next morning, experts were able to end the nuclear chain reaction by draining water from the surrounding cooling jacket installed on the precipitation tank and adding a boric acid solution to the tank to reduce all contents to subcritical levels. However, Hisashi and his 2 colleagues were not so lucky. Ouchie had been exposed to 17 SV of radiation, his colleague Shinohara 10 SV,
Whoa.
and Yokaawa received 3 SV.
Okay, that is a lot. Like, when you work in a nuclear power plant, like, it's 0.0 something that you're allowed to be in contact with. That is melt your internal organs, skin dripping off your bones, kind of.
To put this into perspective, the allowable dose for plant workers was 0.05. The worst affected was 35-year-old Ouchie, whose exposure to radiation was so extreme that most of his body had severe burns, and his internal organs were seriously damaged. In addition, his chromosomes were destroyed, and his white blood cell count plummeted to near 0, meaning he had no immune system. Ouchie was placed in a special radiation ward to limit.
Yeah, he had been completely, like, sanitized of everything. Even the ability to live. That's awful.
The risk of infection. Over the course of the next few weeks, Ouchie was treated with various experimental drugs and procedures, including peripheral blood stem cell transplantation, repeated cultured skin grafts, and granulocyte colony stimulating factor, as well as being administered numerous painkillers and antibiotics. Even though it was clear the damage Ouchie's body had sustained through radiation was untreatable. However, neither the transfusions or transplants could keep his bodily fluids from leaking out of his pores.
Ugh. So he was sweating himself out, basically. Ugh.
During the first week of these pointless experiments, Ouchie was conscious enough to tell the doctors that he couldn't take it anymore. He was not a guinea pig.
Whoa. He said the first week of these experiments? So it went on longer than a week, and this... Hold on. Whoa.
Bodily fluids from leaking out of his pores. During the first week of these pointless experiments, Ouchie was conscious enough to tell the doctors that he couldn't take it anymore. He was not a guinea pig.
Okay, so during the first week of these experiments, he was conscious enough to tell them basically he wanted to die. He wasn't a guinea pig. Yeah. And they continued? Bro, no.
Still, despite his pleas, they continued to treat him, and at the request of his family, doctors repeatedly revived him when his heart stopped. Ouchie was being kept alive against his will when it was clear there was no hope of survival. Almost all of his body had been
That's
completely
inhumane.
destroyed, and most of his skin was peeled off. After 83 agonizing days, Ouchie died on December 21st, 1999, following an unrecoverable cardiac arrest. The agony Ouchie must have been in does not bear thinking about, and to this day,
happened in
Ouchie holds the
1999?
record for the most radiation experienced by a person who survived the initial dose. But at what cost? Keeping him alive when there was no hope of survival is one of the most significant examples of human torture in the 20th century. The ethical value of his prolonged treatment was questioned and received criticism. Now, we know there are photographs of Ouchie's suffering out there, but we are not sure of their authenticity, and some are too horrific to show, so we have chosen not to. As for the other two workers, well, sadly, despite a 7-month battle, during which Shinohara appeared to be recovering, he died on April 27, 2000, of multiple organ failure. He too had endured radical treatments and numerous successful skin grafts, as well as a transfusion from congealed umbilical cord blood, but was still unable to fight the radiation-induced infections and internal bleeding that eventually caused fatal lung and kidney failure. Their supervisor, Yokokawa, did manage to survive and was released after 3 months with minor radiation sickness, although he faced negligence charges in October 2000.
So the supervisor actually made it, just to be charged with negligence. More likely, he got sent to prison. So, because I'm pretty sure if you're charged with negligence that caused other people's lives to be lost, you getting some time. If not, you should get some time. I mean, that's just how it is.
Phone stalker Hal. It might seem trivial to be terrorized by a prank, but if you really think about it, to be constantly bombarded by an unknown stalker who must be watching your every move would be terrifying. In 2007, 16-year-old Courtney Kuykendall from Firecrest, Washington, started receiving random text messages from her friends asking her why she had sent them text messages simply saying gay. At first, Courtney was slightly confused, as she knew she hadn't sent any such messages, and she brushed it off as a misunderstanding, or possibly a prank by her friends. However, things got a lot more sinister, and Courtney, as well as her friends, started receiving threatening text messages and phone calls from an unknown person who came up on their phones with no caller ID. The other families affected were the McKays and the Prices, all who knew each other and lived close by. They began to refer to the unknown caller as Restricted. Restricted would regularly call and threaten to kill or rape them, kill members of their family, attack their schools, and even threaten to kill their pets.
What? See, this is why I don't like phones. Not because of this specific reason, but I've never liked phones. I really think phones are useless. If I want to talk to someone, I go talk to them. I never want to talk to anyone. I don't. I hate talking to people on the phone. I do. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to talk about. Someone calls like, hey man, hey, what are you doing? Answering the phone and saying, hey, what do you mean, what am I doing? What? I don't know what to say on now. I don't like doing the record your name and all that for your mailbox. I don't like that. I'm like, yeah. I don't like none of it. And I'm glad I don't, because my cell phone is, I don't know where my cell phone's at. The only reason why I keep it, in case there's an emergency with my mom or my dad or Krista or the kids. I don't, and this doesn't make me want to have anything to do with my cell phone More than one, no.
The messages and calls had gone way beyond a joke and started coming through around the clock on the family's landlines and mobile devices. Courtney, her family and her friends, who were all being targeted by these disturbing calls, tried to stop the harassment by switching phones, changing their numbers, and turning their phones off and getting new accounts. However, nothing seemed to stop Restricted from getting through. By now, the police were involved, and at one point in the presence of the police, all the family's phones turned on and called each other. Things started looking bad for Courtney after the police traced the threatening messages back to her phone.
How is... Yeah, I understand. You gonna trace it back to her phone. But if you was literally right there and you witness the phone freaking turning on by itself, and they all just start calling each other for no apparent reason. I mean, 2 plus 2, you know? I'm just saying. Just saying that. How you gonna blame someone that's whatever? It is.
Which seemed to be able to send messages and make calls even when she had turned it off. Things got worse when the family returned home one day after a meeting with the police regarding the phone calls, and they received a voicemail that consisted of a recording of an exact conversation they had had that day. By now, even Courtney's parents suspected she had something to do with the harassment, so they took her phone off of her, but that failed to stop the calls and messages. The families also realised that whoever the stalker was, they could not only hear everything that they said, but they also seemed to be able to see them, even when they were inside their homes, and even after the family got a new security system keypad for their home. Restricted called to tell the family that they knew their new passcode. One night, the family heard someone banging on the side of their house before running off into the night. At this point, even taping over their camera lenses and removing batteries from their devices failed to stop the stalker. The ongoing harassment and lack of answers proved to be the stuff of nightmares. It was a crime in which the victims were continually terrorized by an unknown person that left police utterly baffled.
So not only is this stalker able to call them, text them, call each other from the phones, text them from the phones, everything, he can also just see them. And what else did he say? That.
And even after the family got a new security system keypad for their home, Restricted called to tell the family that they...
Yeah, okay, I heard it right. So they go out and get a new security system, and somehow this fool knows the new passcode to the brand new security system that they just got. What?
knew their new passcode. One night, the family heard someone banging on the side of their house before running off into the night. At this point, even taping over their camera lenses and removing batteries from their devices failed to stop the stalker. The ongoing harassment and lack of answers proved to be the stuff of nightmares. It was a crime in which the victims were continually terrorized by an unknown person that left police utterly baffled. The phone calls continued day and night for over 4 months. It was no longer just a sick inconvenience. It was causing uncontrollable fear and anxiety to all involved. At some point in their desperation, it's rumoured that the FBI got involved, and that is when the harassment stopped. But if the case was ever officially solved, it was never publicly...
Why did it just stop after the FBI got involved for? That's a little weird. A little weird.
stated. It's worth remembering that the police had recordings of the stalker's voice, although it was heavily disguised. So who exactly was terrorizing the 3 families involved in this case? And why would someone go to such trouble,
We may
causing so
never
much terror
know.
and anxiety? What could they gain from it? Could it have just been a clever hacker testing how robust a mobile phone was at the time? or some kind of spy test by the government. After all, the first iPhone launched in 2007, the same time all of this was happening. It's interesting that Courtney and her family did live near McCord Air Force Base, and her brother-in-law worked there. Although it's also worth pointing out, all three families involved have always denied any involvement in the stalking. Was the whole thing a sick hoax, or was there something more sinister going on? What's your thoughts?
My thoughts is I'd get like one of those old rotary phones. You know, be done with it. Yep.
Teenage vampire. It's hard to believe that a child's ambition when they grow up is to be a vampire. After all, surely vampires
Mom and Daddy let that child watch way too much Twilight as a child. Just saying. Just saying. No.
aren't real, they're just creatures from folklore that like to feast on blood. While for Matthew Hardman, that is exactly what he wanted to be, and as he entered his teenage years, becoming a real-life vampire became a deadly obsession for him. Matthew lived in the sleepy village of Llanfairpwllgwynlleth, on the island of
Then Llanfairpwllgwynlleth is. How do you get that out of this? Is this the pronunciation of it? Welcome to Llanfairpwllgwynlleth, the village with the long name. That's more than just a long name, bro. That is just a bunch of letters. That's like Scrabble. Village of Scrabble.
Anglesey in North Wales, and outwardly he seemed just like a normal kid. He lost his father when he was young, although that did not appear to have affected him growing up, and he lived happily with his mother, who was a nurse. At school, Matthew was diligent and well behaved, despite being dyslexic, and when he left school, he started college in Bangor, where he had plenty of friends and did normal teenage things like play video games, listen to music, and go out with his friends. But unbeknown to anyone, Matthew had developed a fixation on vampires, to the point where he became convinced that the creatures existed. His overriding thoughts were, how do I become a vampire, and how do I become immortal? And Matthew decided he needed to sacrifice another human to find out. The only person who had an inkling about this fixation was Matthew's teenage girlfriend, a German exchange student, although at the time she had no idea just how far he was prepared to take his obsession. She recalled how Matthew described the area they lived in as perfect stalking ground for vampires, because, as he put it, the locals were so old that people wouldn't be suspicious if they died. He also tried to convince her that she was a vampire and begged her to bite him, sometimes shoving his neck into her mouth and screaming at her to sink her teeth into him. However, although she was alarmed by his vampire obsession and thought it had gone beyond a joke, she had
Yeah, there's some definite red flags on the field with this kid. I could understand having an obsession with vampires, werewolves, zombies, so on and so forth. But to the point where you're gonna be like, hey, baby, suck my blood. That's a sick puppy right there.
no idea how seriously he took it. But Matthew was deadly serious about vampires being real, and he was determined to initiate himself into their secret community and put a plan in place to fulfill his bizarre notion. His target was 90-year-old Mabel Leshon, a widow who had lived a few doors from his home and who he knew as he used to be her paperboy. Matthew meticulously planned what he was going to do. On the evening of November 24, 2001, Matthew broke into Mabel's bungalow as she sat watching television in her living room. He crept up behind her and launched a sustained and brutal knife attack on the old lady, stabbing her 22 times. But killing her was just the first step in this ritual sacrifice. Once Mabel was dead, he proceeded to drain some of her blood into a saucepan from her kitchen. He drank some of the blood. He then crudely cut her heart out of her chest and placed it in a saucepan on a silver platter. Matthew then positioned 2 brass pokers at Mabel's feet in the shape of a crucifix and placed a candlestick on the floor close to her body. He balanced a red candle on the mantelpiece before leaving the
This boy's deranged. He did all that because he wanted to be a vampire. Vampires don't stab people or cut out hearts, as far as I know. I mean, I've never met one, but I would imagine they would want their victim to be alive. That way, you know, when they get hungry again, they can go back and eat. It makes sense, right?
house.
Never was a Twilight fan, I couldn't tell you.
The next morning, Mabel's horrified carer discovered the grotesque scene when she called round with Mabel's Sunday lunch. Shocked, police officers immediately launched a manhunt, and one police officer told journalists the devil has been to Anglesey. Little did they know that the devil was the unassumingly local lad who lived down the road. Matthew Hardman was soon implicated by a wealth of evidence, including DNA he left at the scene, and Mabel's blood traces on the knife, which he kept in his bedroom. Matthew was sentenced to life in prison, and to date he is still incarcerated. The motive for the horrific crime was Matthew's irresistible attraction to the mythology of vampirism and the search for immortality. It just goes to prove you never know what's going on in someone's head. Matthew wasn't a local outcast, he wasn't known as a bad boy. He was just an outwardly normal kid who festers a grotesque obsession, which makes this case the stuff of nightmares.
Wow.
Sylvia Likens. The senseless murder of anyone is tragic enough, but when the murderer is someone close who is supposed to be a caregiver, it seems almost inconceivable, and the case of 16-year-old Sylvia Likens is so disturbing that decades later, the horror of what happened to her lingers on in Indianapolis. On October 26, 1965, Indianapolis police were called to 3850 East New York Street. There they found the body of 16-year-old Sylvia Likens. Immediately they could tell that her death was not the result of a single incident of murder. It was obvious that Sylvia had sustained prolonged torture and abuse. Sylvia Likens came from a poor family from southern Boone County, just northwest of Indianapolis. Her father, Lester, worked a range of different jobs to try and make a living, one of which was travelling with carnivals selling food from a concession cart. And it was this work in the summer of 1965 that led Lester and his wife Betty to leave their children in the care of others until they returned. The couple had 5 children, but the eldest, Diana, was grown up and married. So it was the other 4 they needed to find homes for. It was decided their 2 sons, Danny and Benny, would live with their grandparents, and their 2 younger girls, Sylvia and Jenny, would stay with a friend of a friend, a woman called Gertrude Banisuski, who lived in a big house at the corner of...
Oh, you two get to go live with your grandparents. You two are going to go to a friend of a friend. No. No. That is not okay. I mean, I understand this is back in the day where it was probably more acceptable than it is nowadays, but no.
East New York Street in Indianapolis. Gertrude was willing to look after the girls for a fee of $20 a week, and they moved in with Gertrude's 7 children, whose age ranged from 17 to 18 months. The Likens thought the company of other children would be perfect for their 2 daughters whilst they were away. Jenny was the shyer of the 2 girls. She had suffered from childhood polio and walked with a limp, while in contrast Sylvia was more confident and outgoing and went by the nickname Cookie. She always kept her mouth closed when she smiled because she had a missing front tooth. However, almost as soon as the girls moved in with Gertrude, there was a clash between Sylvia and Gertrude's 17-year-old daughter Paula. The pair just didn't get on. The clash caused friction in the house, and a blame game started between the girls. This later escalated into something much more sinister just a week later, when the $20 money order for looking after the girls did not arrive in the post as expected. Gertrude flew into a rage, blaming Jenny and Sylvia, and slapped both girls. And even though the money arrived the next day, the chain of abuse had been triggered. Gertrude was a frail woman, so to inflict maximum pain on the girls, she used two weapons, an ornamental paddle and a thick leather belt, and she would punish the girls for various menial offences, such as exchanging soft drink bottles for change at a nearby grocery. On more than one occasion, she accused Sylvia of stealing and used matches to burn the girls' fingers. On occasions when she felt too weak to punish the girls, she enlisted the help of her daughter Paula, who was only too happy to inflict pain on Sylvia, who she had grown to intensely dislike. But if that wasn't bad enough, Gertrude also invited the neighbourhood children in to torture Sylvia in particular. As if it was a game, they would crowd into the house and practice their judo on her, often throwing her against a wall. Others would beat and kick her just for laughs, and some started stubbing out their cigarettes on her skin. Often, after being beaten or burned, Sylvia was forced into a scalding hot bath to cleanse her sins. When the traumatized girls started wetting the bed, Gertrude decided she was no longer fit to live with the rest of the children, and she was thrown into a cellar and was not permitted to leave the house. She was given just crackers to eat and was not allowed to use the bathroom. One day, Gertrude announced to her children that Sylvia was a prostitute, and she was so proud of it that she needed it etched onto her stomach. So she took a large needle and began to carve the words, "I am a prostitute and proud of it," into Sylvia's stomach. Gertrude later asked one of the neighbourhood boys, Richard Hobbs, to finish off the etching, and he obliged. After one particular beating, Gertrude realised she had gone too far and Sylvia was dying, so she hatched a plan to blindfold her and dump her in nearby woods. With a note, she forced her to write, saying a gang of boys beat her up. But the plan backfired when Sylvia tried to escape, so Gertrude and one of her sons beat her again and threw her back in the basement. Not long after, the police were alerted, and when they arrived, Sylvia was dead. Her cause of death was determined to be brain swelling, internal hemorrhaging of the brain, and shock induced by extensive skin damage. Sylvia was also emaciated and suffering from malnutrition. Her body was covered in sores, burns and bruises, and the branding on her stomach was clearly visible. Gertrude was arrested but tried to blame her own children for the abuse. But on May 19, 1966, a jury found her guilty of first-degree murder. Her daughter Paula was found guilty of second-degree murder. One of her sons, John, aged 13, and two 15-year-old neighbourhood boys, that included Richard Hobbs, were convicted of manslaughter. Gertrude and Paula were sentenced to life terms, and the boys were sentenced to 2 to 21 years at the Indiana State Reformatory in Pendleton. All three of them were let out after less than 3 years. On appeal, Paula was released after 2 years, and Gertrude, who lost her appeal, was released on parole in 1985. She changed her name to Nadine Van Fossen and moved to Iowa, where she lived in obscurity until her death from lung cancer on June 16, 1990. So that's it for this video. Our heart truly goes out to all of those involved in these 5 stories. Thanks for watching.
Okay. Sorry, that one just... So... I'm sorry, they should have been beat half to death and then put under the jail. Just my opinion, just saying. How could... For one, the parents should have never left the children with a friend of a friend. If you... I don't care. I don't care. 2, I don't care if your kid has a problem with the kid you're taking care of. There's a point, no. And then just inviting people in to just kick them around? No. This woman was deranged. She didn't even need the kids she had. No. Okay, we need to switch it up. Just bit because that was horrible. Let's go with a little bit of Life of Luxury. This one is called He Crawled Out of Her Closet.
What could he be doing in the basement that he needs?
But just saying, that was awful. No little kid, that poor lady, that poor young lady. No one needs to go through that. And all she probably wanted was her mom and dad, her family, and nothing. Nothing was done. That's awful.
He's to hide from his daughter.
Hi, Kayla. Nice to meet you. What's your dad's job? Why is he working in the basement?
He said he was a surgeon, but I've never seen him work in the hospital, only in the basement. Last night, I got these marks.
Bite marks?
Is there a bite mark?
Was
Hey
it
guys,
wearing
before
underwear
this
on
video
set?
starts, please check out our Instagrams. Our usernames are right here. So please follow both of our accounts if you want to support us. Hello, Lux Army. Let's try to smash 100,000 likes to show how strong we are. So for this episode, we received a report from a 19-year-old girl named Kayla. Kayla lives with her dad, and she says that he works in the basement of their house. She also says weird things have been happening in her house at night, like screaming and scratching noises coming from the basement. She sent us this video for proof. Now, Kayla says that she hasn't gone in the basement since she took that video, and that her dad now locks the basement door. Currently, Kayla's dad is on a trip, and she's home alone. So today we're going to drive out to her house and try to find out what's going on. Let's go. Bro, that video actually scared me. What could he be doing in the basement that he needs to hide from his daughter? Yeah, I know her dad deserves his privacy, but we need to find out what's going on in that basement. We don't know what we're walking into. Alright, this looks like the place. Yeah, this is the place. Alright, you ready for this? Alright, I'm nervous. Alright, let's go.
Poor Chester. Poor Chester. Yeah, he's screwed.
Alright, let's go. Bro, is this the right place?
Yeah.
Is that her?
Hi, Kayla. Nice to meet you. Yeah. Can we come in and talk? Okay. Thank you. Okay, Kayla. Thank you for letting us sit down with you.
Sure.
Okay, so can you explain to us more what's been going on?
I think there's something moving down there.
You think there's something in the basement?
Yeah. I hear things moving down there. And last night, I thought there was something in my room, under my bed.
What?
I mean, not to be rude, but it seems like you sound a little bit paranoid. Why do you think that they've been coming into your room?
Last night, I got these marks, and I found them on my body.
What is it? What kind of mark is this?
Are those bite marks?
Is there a bite mark?
If that's bite marks, I would not want to be there because that's a big freaking mouth, bro. I mean, look. That is a big mouth. I'm just perfectly. No. Nope. Nope.
I don't know. It's creeping me out.
Don't jump to any conclusions yet. You know, that could just be a scratch from something on your bed.
One more thing. I saw something in my closet a couple nights ago, and I suddenly started feeling dizzy, and I swear I saw something crawling out of there.
What the hell?
Are you sure that this wasn't just some sort of dream?
I don't know. I've just been feeling kind of sick lately.
This is kind of freaky. I want to see what's going on in the basement.
Yeah, Kayla, what's your dad's job? Why is he working in the basement?
He said he was a surgeon, but I've never seen him work in the hospital, only in the basement.
What? That doesn't make any sense.
I don't know what that means. Alright, well, I don't worry about anything now. We're gonna be here all night. We're gonna set up cameras so we can watch what's going on. Just go to sleep like you normally do. We'll be waiting in the car, watching these cameras, seeing if we can find anything, okay?
Okay.
Just like relax for tonight. Let's get to work.
All right, let's check out that basement.
Put this camera here to watch the basement door. So you wanna try to put a camera in the basement?
Yeah. Open it.
Bro, it's locked from the inside.
It can't be, dude.
Bro, there's a passcode.
What the hell? All right, whatever. I guess we can't put a camera in the basement.
There, we got one there, it's fine. Okay, let's just put a camera in Kayla's room. Hi, Kayla, can we put a camera in your room?
Okay.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna go out to the car. Just go to sleep like normal. Hopefully, we'll talk in the morning.
Okay.
Okay, let's go.
Hopefully we'll talk in the morning, you know. Maybe, maybe not. What the?
Something's feeling really off about this place.
Dude, it's fine. Let's just go to the car. Let's go.
All right.
Alright, so we're waiting in the car right now. We got the cameras set up, watching them on our phone. We got one watching the hallway, one watching the basement door, and we got one in Kayla's room.
Dude, that basement door is locked. I don't know what we're really expecting here.
Well, let's just wait and see. I mean, you can chill out and go to sleep. I'll wake you up if I see anything.
All right.
Is this some human centipede looking stuff? I mean, does the one person have its head tied up the other person's boom? Boom, boom. It looks like they're wearing underwear over their heads. Hold on. You got a tattoo? Yeah, that poor lady's got her head shoved up his bum. Like literally just tied with her head up his bum. Looks like he's wearing underwear over her. He's got underwear over his head. And that didn't wake her up at all. Are you serious?
Yo, wake up.
And you're not gonna
one
wake
of
up?
the cameras is on the ground.
Probably just fell.
But how would it get on the ground?
I don't know, dude.
Check
It
the other
just
one.
fell.
Check the other ones.
What is that thing? Dude, what is he doing?
What's coming out of her mouth?
We gotta go in, bro. Let's go. Let's go inside, okay? Let's go. Let's go.
Get that camera.
Dude, we don't know what he's doing. Wait, this is freaking me out. What is that thing? We gotta go. What's wrong with her?
Hey, Caleb.
What's wrong with her?
Caleb, you gotta wake up. Let's go. Come on, you gotta stand up. Let's go.
What's
What's wrong with her, dude? Let's go, come on, let's go! Come on. We gotta get out of here, dude. We gotta get out of here. What the hell was that thing?
I don't know.
Let's go, dude, drive!
Oh, yeah.
Drive!
Do you feel okay? Are you feeling okay?
We're gonna get you somewhere safe.
Okay, yeah, we gotta go. We gotta get out of here.
You feel okay? Where can we get you somewhere safe?
Hey guys, thank you for watching this video. If this video hits 100,000 likes, we'll release the next episode.
Oh god. Oh jeez. Alright, let's go with... I believe this is King Frostmare Ghost. Let's see, scary evidence that ghosts really exist.
How you doing? I'm Callan.
Oh.
This is Slapped Ham. Today we're
I am sorry, this is Slapped Ham. I don't know why I said... My bad. My bad, everyone. This is Slapped Ham. That is Callan. Right there. Say hi, Callan. And this is Slapped Ham. And it is called Scary Evidence That Ghosts Really Exist. Yeah. Sorry.
looking at some ghost sightings that are starting to freak the internet out. But as always, before we dive into these fascinating stories, remember to hit that subscribe button for more scary content.
Yep.
Just like this.
Definitely go show the man some love. He does amazing work.
In 1983, Karen Collette rode the London Underground with her nephew on an afternoon outing. While on the Bakerloo line, Collette took a number of photos of her nephew sitting on the train, smiling. She thought nothing of the snaps at the time other than a cute way to remember the day. However, when she later had the photos developed, something strange was apparent in one of the pictures. Here you can see Colette's nephew holding a camera, smiling. Strangely, in the background is a stylized image of a seated man with electricity shooting out his fists. The train was speeding through a tunnel at the time and there was no advertising on the rear wall of the cabin. Collette was at a loss to...
How do we know there was no advertising on the rear wall of the train? We don't know this. Is there pictures of the wall behind her? I'm calling bull. I got to. It's been a minute.
explain the image. At the time, the photo caused quite a stir, so much so that it caught the attention of paranormal investigator Maurice Gross, who gained notoriety for his involvement in the Enfield poltergeist case in 1977. Gross carefully studied the image and found a number of bizarre details. Firstly, it was determined that it was highly unlikely that the image was manipulated. Robert Cox from the National Museum of Photography, Film and Television noted that specialised equipment would be needed to pull off such an image in the early 1980s. Gross continued to investigate the photo and discovered a match for the image of the seated man seen in the window. It was an almost exact copy of a figure on display at the time in Madame Tussauds Chamber of Horrors exhibit in London. The man is Bruno Richard Hauptmann, a German-born carpenter. In 1932, he was convicted of the abduction and murder of 20-month-old Charles Lindbergh Jr. It became known as the crime of the century. Hauptmann denied his involvement in the case to the very end when he was executed in 1936, put to death in the electric chair. Here's a comparison of Madame Tussauds' waxwork and the reflection in the London Underground. The two images were found to be identical, except for the stylized bolts of electricity shooting out of his fists in the London Underground image.
The belt
Theories
a
at
little
the
bit
time
higher, too.
suggested Two Swords must have used the wax figure as advertising and posted the image in the London Underground. However, records indicate that the image was never used in marketing throughout its entire showing. To make this story even more mysterious, another strange incident happened to Colette sometime later. Months after the London Underground image was taken, Colette went to visit a psychic medium with a friend. While Colette's friend sat for her reading, the medium left the room and approached Colette. She said it was urgent that she talk about her photo. This is what the medium said. "It's about your photo. I just want you to know," the man said, "I'm accused of something I didn't do, but I did something else." While the message is cryptic, Hauptmann insisted he was innocent even in the minutes that led to his execution. This eerie set of events has continued to baffle anyone who investigates the incident. In 2005, the BBC aired a program called The Ghosts on the Underground, which featured interviews with Colette, Robert Cox and Gross. But even after the BBC completed their investigation, the incident remains a complete mystery. In December 2020, TikToker DM Wesley began experiencing something strange in his home. Over a period of several weeks, he started hearing mysterious noises around the house. It got so persistent that he began trying to capture it on camera to share with the internet. After some days, he finally managed to capture the noise on camera. Take a look.
Okay, so I'm literally home alone. Listen to how loud and aggressive it is.
He's allegedly home alone, yet loud knocks can be heard at the door.
Literally home alone. Listen to how loud and aggressive it is.
In this second clip, we can see it happening again.
Okay, so I'm trying to get ready for bed. And there's another one.
This time, he tries knocking back.
Everyone's been asking me to try and knock back. You
In the third clip, we see the uploader awoken from a nap by the intense banging yet again.
So it's literally 3 in the afternoon, and it's been happening more during the day, and it's just not even scary. It's just...
There's clearly no one around.
To be completely honest, I can't take this anymore.
This series of videos went viral, with thousands of viewers intrigued by the eerie events. Naturally, hundreds of comments poured in trying to solve the mystery. Here's the TikToker answering one of the most common questions.
So I get this comment a lot, so I'm just going to show you right above the door. So here's the door frame, and right above it, there is no attic, just a smoke detector and a vent. And since I know people are going to ask, this is the closet right outside the room, no attic.
Some viewers suggested installing a camera outside the door to see if you can gather any footage that might explain what's going on. As it stands, this is an ongoing mystery. There's regular updates on the account, which we'll link to in the description box below. It's well worth checking out.
I mean, okay. If this is real, he's not acting like, oh my god, my life is in danger. He's just kind of like, you piece of, I just want you to quit. Which is hilarious. 2, like, I'm not seeing a shadow on the bottom of the door, because 9 times out of 10, in what I've seen so far, there's a light on in that little hallway where the fire detector and stuff is. I've not seen a shadow. So either there's beating on the door, standing on the steps, going upstairs, but he does pan down there pretty fast. I mean, and I'm not seeing no cutaways. Like, I don't know about this one. I don't know about this one. Like, goes to real. I'm just saying. So, yeah.
Everyone's been asking me to try and knock back.
No
I
one
like
likes
that.
being woken up by strange
You-
noises around their home. YouTube user Ziggy09 managed to capture this exact situation on tape, making viewers double check their rooms before bedtime. In the video, we can see a person sleeping in a dark room. The person tosses and turns before getting up and turning on the light in the room. Watch what happens. As you can see, a strange figure appears in the window.
Okay, I'm sorry, but they got curtains. If you are laying down going to sleep, why is your curtains not pulled? You brought that on yourself. That's your buddy sitting out there. You got planned out because I'm sorry, you go to bed, you shut your blinds, you close your curtains. That's just what you do. Boo. Call him boo.
The curtain on the right hand side of the window inside the house moves slightly at the same time. Whatever it is just outside the window, it lingers for a few moments before disappearing. The individual returns and looks out the window for a few seconds. He then turns off the lights and gets back into bed. Later, more noises are heard. Take a look at what happens. This time, something white appears in the window. Unfortunately, this clip was filmed on a mouldy potato more than 10 years ago, so we're not able to get a clear view of what it is that's lurking outside the window. So just what is tapping at the
whoever's
window
behind
and
that
waking
curtain.
this person up, perhaps?
I'm sorry, but there's someone behind the curtain too. Like, there is. You can tell. Because every time the thing moves outside the window, it moves. Watch.
Unfortunately, this clip was
See?
filmed on a mouldy potato more than
See?
10 years ago, so we're not able to get a clear
See?
view of what it is that's lurking outside
There's a
the
window behind this curtain. There's a window behind this curtain that's open, and someone is leaning out of it that is standing right there. There's a leg, there's a leg, there's an arm. No. Look, I might have been born in the morning, but it wasn't this morning. Don't give me that boat. No. Nope.
So just what is tapping at the window and waking this person up?
Their buddy.
Perhaps we'll never know.
It's their buddy. But see, every time something happens outside that main window, the
TikToker
person
Megs
behind the
Loves
curtain
Ya
moves.
seems to have caught something
They are doing
eerie
it.
on their home security system.
Just saying.
In the first of a series of videos, we see footage shot from the security camera of the TikToker's front door. Take a look.
Someone jogging at night.
We can see what looks to be a transparent figure jogging along the road in the early morning hours.
That happens with cameras. It happens with my cameras.
In the second clip uploaded by the TikToker, she's zoomed in on the original footage. Here we can see that the figure's body does indeed seem transparent, though the figure's face looks more solid. In the last clip, the TikToker shares footage of her daughter running outside of her home to prove that she shows up solid on film.
Okay, it's a different time of day,
We can see that the daughter does indeed have a more solid form.
and this other person looked like they was across
After
the
this,
street.
in the same clip, we can see footage of a car driving by the home, proving that objects show up clearly on the camera as well. There were tons of suggestions from other TikTok users on what this could be. Some believe that the ghostly figure looked the way they did due to dark clothing, or perhaps they were wearing reflective exercise wear. Others, though, thought that this was actually a ghost.
No.
They suggested it could be the spirit of a jogger who died
No
on
one
this
thinks
very
it's a
stretch of
ghost.
road. Although there's no evidence to suggest this footage continues to intrigue viewers.
Nope. Not a ghost. Just a person jogging.
Ghost Stalkers Paranormal Investigations are a group of supernatural researchers operating out of North Carolina. They regularly travel to some of the most haunted places in the United States in the hopes of capturing evidence of otherworldly happenings. However, this next clip happened a little closer to home when they captured something strange in the back of a video of their son dancing. Take a look. While it's a little hard to make out at first, something appears to zip past the dancing child. The
Lens
YouTuber
flare.
believes that their house is active with spirits.
No.
They claim that a number of young children haunt their home. One in particular is a notorious entity they've dubbed Anna. The YouTuber believes that this is proof that Anna's spirit is lingering in the home. Could it be that their young son has befriended ghostly Anna? Or is there another way to explain this strange sighting? Love to hear your theories in the comment section down
Just a
below.
glare off the lens, bruh.
Before we take a look at an eerie
Trying to
image
feed me
taken in
some
a bar,
boo.
remember to hit that subscribe button, then tick who passed away will visit from time to time. It's a comforting thought, though it's very rare to have actual proof of this happening. Reddit user bbeckers78 may have been able to experience just this situation and shared a photo as proof. In the photo, we see three people posing together in a bar setting. In the background, directly above the woman in the middle, is what appears to be a blurry, slightly transparent figure. The figure resembles a woman smiling at the camera. Next to her, on the left, is a very bright orange light.
Which she is
The Redditor who
obscuring.
posted this picture insisted that there was no one behind the group when the photo was taken,
There was.
as he and his friends were the last people in the bar that
No.
night. Moreover, he claims that the
That is either another one of their friends, or it's someone photobombing them. We got them big old beefy brains.
orange light
Telling
was
you.
not a bar light, and that it seemed to have appeared with the woman.
We smart here on this channel.
He believes
No.
that the woman is the
No.
ghost of his
No.
mother, who passed away. Most other Redditors seem not to believe the photo, guessing that someone could have easily popped up in the background as a kind of photobomb. They blame the woman's transparency and the bright light as the result of a shaky hand taking the picture. Still, there are a small group of Redditors who thought the original poster should have the right to believe that this is his mum. If it brings him comfort,
I
it may just
mean-
be best to let this Redditor
If it brings him comfort, so be it. But look how blurry they are. Someone in the back with that bright light shining on the camera. No, it's it's not your mom, bro. I'm sorry. Yeah. Just
at
saying.
this moment.
Have your moment, though, dude. Have your moment.
Light in the room.
Alright, so. I say we end with a little bit of a MR.BALLEN. This one is MR.BALLEN, the Valley of Headless Men. Anxiety warning.
Today's story is a classic don't go in the woods type of story. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan
Like, I know I play MR.BALLEN on almost every video I do, but I love watching MR.BALLEN. Like, he is an amazing storyteller. Like, he is. And I like that all of his stuff is like real. I like it. Like, if you going camping, he the dude you want telling the ghost stories.
Located in the far northwestern section of Canada is the aptly named Northwest Territories. It is a massive swath of land that virtually nobody lives inside of. To make that point crystal clear, consider the following. The country of Germany has a population of 83 million people, give or take. The Northwest Territories is 4 times as large as Germany, but only has a population of about 50,000 people. In addition to being this huge and mostly unoccupied space, the Northwest Territories are almost completely wild. Think dense forests, huge mountains, massive rivers and lakes, and lots of really big animals. Even for highly experienced outdoors men and women, the Northwest Territories can be a truly hazardous place. And within this truly hazardous place, there is one part that is the most hazardous, and it's right in the middle of the Northwest Territories. And it's this 11,000 square mile stretch of just pure wilderness that's called the Nahanni Valley. In 1976, the Nahanni Valley was made into a national park. But don't let that fool you. This is not some family park that anybody can go to. There are no tourist accommodations, so there's no hotels, there's really nothing inside of it. And there are no roads that lead into this park. The only way you can get inside this valley is by plane or by boat or by very stressful and difficult overland hike. But for those who are able and willing to make the effort to get inside of this valley, you have the opportunity to explore one of the most beautiful places on the planet, because this section of the world is almost completely untouched by man. It is really nature at its purest form. However, there's a catch. This valley is said to be haunted. Over the last 10,000 years, the handful of native tribes that have attempted to settle inside of the Nahanni Valley have all either suddenly disappeared without a trace, like the Naha tribe, that literally overnight just was gone, leaving behind their shelters, their food, their supplies, just gone. No one knows what happened to them. Or the tribes have abruptly fled, claiming they were being terrorized or stalked by creatures lurking in the forest, like these white demons and these large wolves they called wahilas. Now, of course, this just sounds like folklore, and it might very well be that that's all it is, folklore. But starting in the early 1900s, some very strange things started happening in the Nahanni Valley that were not folklore. These things happened, and they were horrifying. These were horrifying, real events. And they might, depending on your viewpoint, give credit to some of the theories that the native tribespeople have about this valley, which is there's something evil lurking out in this forest, but we just don't know what it is. In 1904, 3 brothers, Willie, Frank, and Charlie McLeod, who all lived in the Northwest Territories, decided they wanted to go looking for gold in the Nahanni Valley. They figured because so few people had ever been inside of this valley, that if there was gold to be found, then certainly it had not been found yet. And so after a very long and arduous journey,
They have a point.
using sled dogs and trains and homemade boats, they finally slipped into the valley and found themselves on what's called the Flat River, which runs right through the center of the Nahanni Valley. Now, the Flat River is kind of ironically named because it's anything but flat. It's actually more like a rapid at certain points. But either way, the 3 brothers, they're on their boat, they're making their way up the Flat River, and at some point they pull off onto the riverbank and they set up camp. And then once their camp is set up, they go down to the river and they put their gold sluices in the water. A gold sluice is this long, skinny box that's usually made of wood, and it has a strainer on one side. And gold miners will put it in the water, submerged, and they will kind of shovel the sediment on the bottom of the water into this little funnel, and the big stuff will get stopped by the strainer, and the dirt and the water will just kind of flow out the side. And so the idea is you can trap gold nuggets inside of this sluice. And so the 3 brothers, they get their sluices up, and they start looking for gold, and right away they hit pay dirt. There there is tons of gold in this river. And so all day, all night, they get all this gold. The next morning, they do the same thing. And by the time all their containers are literally filled to the brim with gold, they decide, hey, let's go back and turn this in, get some money for it, and then come back out here. And so they pack up their tent, they pack up all their supplies, and they put everything back in their boat. They get out onto Flat River, and at some point, very early on in their journey back, the boat capsizes, and the boat actually breaks apart from the strength of the rapids of Flat River. And so the boat actually just sinks, and much of their supplies sink, including all of their gold. But the three brothers are able to grab some of their supplies, like their rifle and some lumber and some of their mining supplies, and they swim it all to shore. They catch their breath. They're totally devastated at the loss of the gold, but they're alive. They have enough supplies to survive. And so they figure all they can do is maybe try to go back to their original site, try to get some more gold because they did still have a sluice, and then try to get out of there and then, regroup and come back another time. And so using some of the lumber they recovered from their broken boat, and then also by cutting down some trees, they literally fashioned another boat and then hopped back on the Flat River, and they went back up to that site where they had found gold earlier. They set up their sluice, they set up their camp again, and this time they didn't find any gold. So all day, this very disappointing day that they've already lost all their gold, now they're not finding any more gold. And so that night when they went to bed, they decided that the next day they were just going to leave. And so the next day they get up, they pack up, they hop back on the Flat River on this new boat they built, and they're able to make their way out of the valley and get back to their homes. As soon as they get back home, the two younger brothers, Willie and Frank, start talking about how they want to go back into Nahanni Valley and go get more gold, because now they know there's gold out there. It's not a question, yeah, we didn't find it that second time, but we know it's out there. Charlie, the older brother, he wanted to get the gold, but he felt like, hey, that was a close call with the boat flipping over. I don't know if it's a good idea, so I'm actually not going to go. You guys can go. I'm going to stay.
He's a smart one.
So several months goes by, and Frank and Willie have been doing all this prep.
He's a smart one. I wouldn't have gone back either. Couldn't pay me. I don't know. That sounds like a lot of gold. I don't know. I might have.
Preparation for this additional trip into the valley. And finally, in 1905, they're ready. And so Willie, Frank, and a third man called Robert Weir, who was a friend of theirs, he was going to replace Charlie. The three of them, they make their way up into the valley. Now, they didn't tell anyone how long they were going to be gone for, and so when they didn't send any word and no one had heard from them in weeks, Charlie was actually not that concerned because he knew there was lots of gold to be had out in the Nahanni Valley, and so he figured they must have struck it rich, and now they've decided to live out there long term, or at least maybe through the summer, or maybe the next year, and so he wasn't concerned, and because he wasn't concerned, nobody else was concerned about these three men. And so weeks turned into months, turned into a year, and still no one's heard from these three men. No one's heard from Willie, Frank, or from Robert, but still Charlie maintains that nothing can be wrong because there's three of them out there. They're incredibly experienced. There is a ton of gold out there. I'm sure they're just killing it and they're just acquiring all this gold, and we're going to see them in the next couple of months maybe, and everything's going to be just fine. But a whole other year would go by, so they've been out there for 2 years and no one has heard from them. And at this point, Charlie thinks to himself, okay, I have to go out and see if they're okay. And so he rounds up 4 other people from his town, and he mounts an expedition to head back into the Nahanni Valley to go find his 2 brothers and find Robert Weir. Charlie and his search party, eventually, after yet another long and arduous journey, they get into Nahanni Valley and they get onto the Flat River. And so they start making their way upstream along Flat River. So it must have been a very treacherous journey getting through the rapids of this river. And the whole time they're scanning the left and the right side, hoping to see some sign of life. They're looking for any indication that these 3 men are out here and just fine, but they didn't see any sign of them. And so they finally made their way all the way up to the very end of Flat River, or I should say the very beginning of Flat River, where it breaks off from a much larger river called the South Nahanni River. And once they turned onto the South Nahanni River, they began going downstream. And again, they're looking on either side for any sign of these 3 men. There's no sign of them. And then the river they're on takes a very sharp turn. It's actually called the Big Bend, and it's about a 45-degree turn. And as soon as you make that turn, it dumps you into this 10-mile stretch of river called Second Canyon. Now, along South Nahanni River, which is about 350 miles long, there are these 4 canyons that the water passes through. And they're labeled 4th Canyon, 3rd Canyon, 2nd Canyon, and 1st Canyon. And these canyons are massive. These sheer cliffs on either side of the river shoot up to 3,000 feet above the water, and in some parts, the water is actually just as deep, thousands of feet deep. And Second Canyon is unique because the cliff faces are as sheer as you're going to get, and the cliff faces almost butt up exactly up against the water. So there's really very little shoreline on either side. So once you're in this 10-mile stretch, you're basically boxed in. You have thousands of feet of water below you. You have these massive cliffs on either side, and there's really nowhere to go. You need to get through this section of the river before you can effectively get onto the shoreline and take a break from being in your boat. And along these cliffs are these openings you see high up all over the cliffs on both sides that are openings to these massive cave systems inside of these thousands of feet tall cliffs. And because of how difficult it is to not only get to Nahanni Valley, but also to get up to these different cave openings, nobody's gone inside of them. We don't know what's inside of these caves, save for the few that are down low enough that people can explore. So
that's cool, though. I mean, that is pretty cool. It is. I'm sorry. That's cool.
As you're passing through Second Canyon, it's almost like you're being watched because there's all these openings, but you can't see into them, and you're just forced to go down this 10-mile stretch, and you can't really go anywhere, and whatever's watching you, it's watching you. As soon as Charlie and his search party entered into Second Canyon, it would have immediately gotten darker because that's another part of being in Second Canyon. These huge cliff walls of this canyon obscure the sunlight, and so they would have entered into this canyon. It would have gotten darker, and it's very windy inside of Second Canyon. So the winds would have picked up, so it's dark. It's a very strange setting for them to be in, and they would have been looking on either side at these little strips of shoreline on either side, barely big enough for a boat to be. They would have been looking for any sign of life, but they didn't see anything. As they're making their way down this 10-mile stretch, as they're getting closer and closer to actually entering into First Canyon, which is the next canyon you would enter into, the sides of the river start to get slightly larger where you could actually beach a boat. There's some trees, and on the left-hand side, right before exiting Second Canyon, they notice there is actually a tent perched within some trees. And so the search party naturally goes right over to the shoreline. They hop out, but as soon as they step foot on land and they have a clearer view of this tent and what's outside of it, they notice there is a body clearly lying on the ground outside of the tent. And so Charlie and the search party, they run over, and as soon as they're up close, they can tell this body is missing its head. And they see the clothes on this body are totally charred and burned, and whoever this was, they were reaching with their right arm when they died. And right outside of the reach of their right arm was a rifle that was propped up against a tree. And so they walk around this one body, and they go around towards the backside of the tent where the opening to this tent is, and they find another body, another very badly decomposed body, and it's positioned kind of halfway in the tent and halfway out of the tent. And there's a blanket kind of partially obscuring this person's body, and when they move the blanket, they see this body too is missing its head. So Charlie and the search party, they continue to search around the camp in hopes of finding the heads of these two people to try to figure out who they are, but they never find the heads. However, they do find some personal effects both in the pockets of these two bodies and then also inside the tent that would confirm these are Charlie's brothers. As for the third man that had been with them, Robert Weir, he was not at the campsite, and in fact he would never actually be found officially. However, a little ways down the river, another partial skeleton would be found several months later that was attributed to Robert. However, that was not 100% confirmed to be Robert. The only other interesting thing that was found at this campsite was a carving in a nearby tree, and it just said, "We have found a fine prospect," indicating that Charlie's brothers had found gold. But there was no gold either on them or in their camp or in the river nearby. Nothing. There was no gold. Charlie and his search party would leave the valley and get in touch with the mounted police, who would come out to the site where the brothers had been found. They would launch an investigation, and ultimately they would come to the conclusion that all three of these men, the two brothers and Robert, had starved to death, and then after they had perished, animals had taken them off, which is why Robert was found so far away and why the skulls were missing from the two brothers. Now, Charlie did not believe that. He believed they had been attacked by native tribes in the area, but the police were not buying that. They said this was a natural thing, this was an accident, and so that's that. When the story
Animals don't set fire to your body. They don't care if you're cooked when they eat you. And I'm pretty sure he said that, the one body looked like it had been charred, like set on fire. Didn't it? Did he? Did he? I don't remember. Either way, they're going to take more than just your head. They're going to eat you. Not just, oh, I'm in the mood for head today.
Of these two decapitated men made the news, people went crazy about this. People were very divided about what they thought really happened. There was a percentage of people that believed that partial skeleton that was found, that was not Robert Weir. He had not died. He had murdered the two brothers, decapitated them, and then made off with their gold. The other percentage of people believed that all three men, the two brothers and Robert, had been attacked by a person, a group of people, an animal, a creature, something. There was some sort of attack. And that's why the two brothers were in those positions that indicated they had encountered something horrifying, with one brother reaching for the gun and the other appearing to have leapt from his bed before he ultimately died. But regardless of which side you fell on, pretty much everybody at the time who heard about the story became terrified of the Nahanni Valley. Specifically, they became terrified of that stretch in Second Canyon where the two brothers had been found. And so actually that stretch got renamed the Headless Valley, and from that point forward, that's all it was known as. And so even though there were obvious gold prospects in the Headless Valley and all along the South Nahanni River and the Flat River, people after this story broke were just not prepared to risk going in there and potentially becoming another victim. And so people kind of stayed away from Nahanni Valley. 8 years later, though, in 1913, a gold prospector named Martin Jorgensen decided, you know what, I'm not going to let some scary stories about some headless men and, ghosts and killers on the loose, I'm not going to let any of that get in the way of me taking gold out of Nahanni Valley. So, all on his own, Martin makes the arduous trek inside of Nahanni Valley. He makes his way up Flat River, and he finally finds a spot about 70 miles upstream of where Headless Valley was, and he actually built a one-room cabin because he was going to stay there through the winter, and then the plan was he would meet up with his partners the following summer. And so right after he got there, he set up his sluices and he started mining for gold, and apparently he found a lot of it because he sent word back to his partners outside of the valley that he had made it rich. And so his partners were really excited to meet up with him the following summer and see how much he got, because they planned on going back into the valley with him that summer. So that summer rolls around, his partners go to the meeting spot right outside the valley, but Martin doesn't show up. And so his partners, they stay outside at this meeting space for several days until finally, when he doesn't show up, they decide, we have to go in there and see if he is okay, because at this point he should have been here. There's no excuse. And so they end up going into the Nahanni Valley. They make their way up Flat River, and they go roughly to the area where they knew he was staying based on the message he had sent earlier. He had described where he was staying, and they actually found his cabin, or I should say they found what was left of his cabin. His cabin had been completely torched, burned to the ground, and laying on the ground next to the burned out cabin was the burned out remains of another headless corpse. And this corpse belonged to Martin Jorgensen. The police did a thorough investigation, but they were never able to determine what actually killed him. The police did not connect Martin's death with the two McLeod brothers' deaths, even though they were all decapitated. They were in roughly the same area, and it happened within a few years of each other, and they looked very, very similar. Even though that all was true, the police said, nope, these are totally separate. Martin died for some reason, and then animals took parts of him away, and that's why his skull is missing. Martin's skull was never located, and the gold that Martin claimed to have struck it rich with was also not at the cabin, not on him. There was no gold anywhere in the vicinity. When Martin's death made the news, people went crazy, and despite the police assuring everyone that his death was not connected to the McLeod brothers' deaths, even though the police were saying that, the public didn't see it that way. It was just too easy to connect one decapitation with 2 other decapitations that have happened close together in a relatively short time frame, and so a lot of people assumed there must be a killer on the loose somewhere in Nahanni Valley. 7 years later, in 1921, the rumors of a killer on the loose were still alive and well when gold prospector John O'Brien and his partner decided, you know what, despite the rumors of this so-called killer or whatever's going on in the Nahanni Valley, let's go into the Nahanni Valley and try our hand. Let's try to get some gold. And so the 2 of them made their way into the valley and they set up camp in Headless Valley, not far from where the McLeod brothers had been found decapitated. So they set up their camp and they're there for a couple of days. They're doing well. They're finding gold. And then at some point, John tells his partner that he's going to go out and check all of their traps along the river. And he'll be back in about 8 or 9 days. And so his partner waits 8 or 9 days and John doesn't come back. And a couple of days after that goes by and now John's past due. And so the partner decides he has to go out looking for him. And so there was another gold prospector in the area. And so this partner contacted him and the 2 of them went to the river and began walking upstream until they found John. And he had frozen to death, but it was very interesting the way he was positioned. He was sitting in front of this obviously previously lit campfire. He wasn't hunched over. He didn't look like he was in pain. He looked like he was just enjoying the fire. There was nothing on his face that indicated discomfort or pain or fear. He was even holding the matchbook in his hand. It was like he was just sitting there enjoying the fire when something caused him to suddenly freeze. In fact, witnesses would say John looked like he had been flash frozen, as if it had happened in a matter of seconds, because it didn't look like he had reacted properly to freezing to death. And the police, when they came out, they would say, you know, this is odd. This is odd the way he's positioned, but ultimately he died because he froze to death, and so there's no foul play here, and so no further investigation is needed. 5 years later, in 1926, a hunting party that included a young woman named Annie Lafferty was camping out along the Flat River inside of Headless Valley. And so that night, they're all kind of joking around the fire, and then at some point they decide to all go to sleep. And then the next day, when everybody gets up, Annie is no longer in camp. And there's no sign of where she went.
Where's she
So
at?
they begin by yelling out and walking around the immediate vicinity to see maybe if she stepped away for a minute, but Annie's just gone.
So, all of the men that is killed, they're just going to take the woman out? Why? What is doing this? Oh my God. I hope there's an answer to what is causing this, because this is getting into the brain, and it's... The police keep saying, oh, it's just natural. It's animal. Animals are not going to burn you. They don't care if their food is cooked. And they're going to take more than just your head. Now people are getting... Now they're flash frozen. What? No. There's got... There better be an answer to all of this. Because it's messing with me. It's messing with me. I ain't lying. I gotta know. Okay. 1, 2 people. Head's gone. I know at least one of the bodies was burned. I don't remember what he said about the other one underneath the blanket, if it was burned or not, but it was missing a head. The one that was set on fire was reaching for a gun. They're not going to reach for a gun unless something's trying to kill them. Okay, they found a skeleton on down, and it could have been the other dude, but who knows? And now another person goes out there, builds a cabin. The cabin is burnt down. The body is burnt. The head is missing, but that was just animals too. No. 2 more people go out. One of them gets flash frozen. Then there's another one out there. So that the one that's left and the other guy goes looking for the frozen dude, and he's frozen, but it's perfectly natural. And now there's a group of people out here, and the only woman with him is just gone? What is going on?
And no one knows where she went. And so the hunting party spends the rest of the day looking for Annie, but there's no sign of her. They ultimately leave the valley. They tell police. Police come out. There's this huge search, but Annie's never found. Several months later, a man named Charlie, who happened to have been out near Flat River, near this hunting party when they were out there, but Charlie himself was not in the hunting party. He didn't know Annie. He was just in the vicinity. He overheard someone talking about a member of that hunting party, specifically a woman, going missing. And when he heard that, he knew he had to tell police what he had seen that night out near Flat River.
What did he see?
He goes to police, and he explains that that night, when he knew there was this hunting party over there, he could hear them, he knew they were over there, he said at some point he went to bed, and then he woke up when he heard the sound of rocks falling into the river in front of him. He was sleeping along the river's edge. So he sits up and he looks out across the river. It's totally dark, but there's some moonlight, and he's kind of looking around wondering what's causing the sound, but he can't see it, and then he hears it again, and he can tell it's off to his left. And these are not huge rocks. These are like medium to small size rocks, like rocks you could just pick up and throw. And so he's looking, and all of a sudden he sees, maybe a couple hundred yards away through some sparse trees, he sees a naked woman, a white naked woman, running on all fours up this mountainside. And as she's running up the mountainside, her feet and her hands are knocking little rocks into the river down below. She's right on the edge of this cliff. And as she's running up this hill, she stops and she turns, and he gets a good look at her face. And Charlie would say he was so taken aback by her face. It looked like she was possessed. There was something wrong with her face. And so Charlie instinctively ducked down and chose not to follow her, even though he knew anybody running naked anywhere in the wilds is doomed. But he felt like he could not go near this woman. There was something wrong with this woman. And so the police, they take this story down and they say, hey, you know, this is what Annie looked like. And Charlie would say, I mean, I think that's her. I think that matches her description. And so universally, it's believed this woman galloping up this hillside in the middle of the night naked was Annie. The police ultimately would not investigate Annie's disappearance any further, because at the time Charlie was telling them this piece of information, she'd already been gone for months, and the assumption was she was dead. 4 years later, in 1931, another gold prospector decides to try their luck in Headless Valley. A man named Phil Powers. He makes his way into the valley. He finds a spot off of Flat River. He builds a cabin, and then shortly thereafter, his cabin burns to the ground with him inside of it. Now, his skeleton was intact, but the strange thing about his death is based on the origin of the fire, which would have been on the roof. He should have had an opportunity to climb out of the cabin before it burned down, giving rise to the theory that he was actually dead before the fire started. However, the police said this was an accident caused by Phil doing something with the stovepipe that led to it catching on fire, and this was just all one big accident.
They need new police. Like, there's been like 1,000 deaths already. They're not all accidents. There's no way.
But the vast majority of people that have followed along to this point with all of these strange deaths, they were just not buying it. 5 years later, in 1936, two more gold prospectors, William Epler and Joseph Mulholland, they entered the Headless Valley to try their luck. And shortly after arriving and getting set up, they went missing. A search party came out to look for them. They found their cabin, and just like Phil Powers, it had burned to the ground, but William and Joseph were not in the ashes. They were not anywhere nearby. In fact, they were never found. No one has any idea what happened to them, and no one knows what caused the fire. 9 years later, in 1945, yet another gold prospector named Ernest Savard entered the Headless Valley to go looking for gold, and then when he did not leave the valley for an intended rendezvous with some of his partners went looking for him, and they would find him inside of his sleeping bag, laying down, decapitated right along the Flat River inside of the Headless Valley. And so the police would come out, they would do an investigation. And
There was
they would call this
animals.
an accident where, you know, he starved to death or he died of hypothermia. And then after he was dead, animals must have come in and removed his skull, and that's why we can't find it. And so the police did not, at least not publicly, connect his death to all of the other decapitations in that small area. 1 year later, in 1946, another gold miner named John Patterson went into Headless Valley and he went missing. And so a search party went in looking for him, and John would never be found. But on one of the last nights that the search party was in the Headless Valley, they were camping out near Flat River, some native tribes people came into their camp and they warned them about some white figures that were walking around the valley that night. They're down near the river, they're out in the forest, they're kind of all around here, and so you really need to be careful. You don't want them to see you. And then these tribes people just left. And so the search party is absolutely horrified. They know about the rumors of this place. They're out here looking for someone that's gone missing in this place. And all night, all they hear are distant howls and screams that they hadn't heard in the previous nights. They're hearing these wailing sounds coming from all around them, like these things that are out there were intentionally trying to scare them to get them to leave. It felt like they were not supposed to be there. The next day, first thing when they got up and they left, the leader of that search party would say he just felt like the whole valley was totally sinister, and that constant wailing they heard the night before, he said he will never forget. From the mid-1940s onward, there have been far less strange incidents reported inside of Nahanni Valley, but one could attribute that to the fact that far less people have been going into Nahanni Valley ever since the 1940s. And in recent times, huge segments of the park have been permanently closed. The park has said the reason they're doing that is to protect that segment of the park. But other people have speculated that at least part of the reason why they're closing these segments, many of which are right near the Headless Valley, is because they're trying to protect people from getting anywhere near whatever it is that's lurking inside of that park. But regardless, it is still a fact that over the last century, there have been dozens and dozens and dozens of people that have either gone missing or who have died under very mysterious circumstances inside of this valley. And the truth is, nobody knows why. So that's gonna do it, guys. If you found the secret...
Oh, sweet. Blah, 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 blah. My brain. Okay, so, like I said, I love the storytelling. Ooh. So dozens upon dozens of people have either been found with their heads cut off, set on fire, houses burned down with them in it, dead, set on fire, completely decapitated, flash frozen somehow, butt-ass naked running up a side of a hill. And all the police can say, it's an accident. Animals did it. We don't know. Oh my. I'll be getting new popo. No lie. Alright, we ended it there, y'all. Like, that one. Yeah. That did it for me. I see the anxiety warning now. Like, oh my god. Ah. Okay, so I hope you guys have enjoyed this as much as I have. Oh. Alright, yeah, that's it. We're good. We're done. I'm outie. So if you haven't already, please subscribe. Give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to leave a comment down below. And if there is someone you want me to react to, leave it in the comments and I'll see what I can do. As always, have a spooky night. Bye-bye.